Welcome to Clarity with Nikki. I'm Nikki Novoselsky, and this is where we get real about creating a life you frickin' love. In today's episode, I'm chatting with Andie Colleen, life transformation coach and breathwork facilitator. Fun fact, we actually went to high school together and have recently reconnected as we both realized we're on a similar path. Fast forward to now, Andie has built an incredible business and life centered around helping people stop self-sabotaging, embrace transformation, and manifest their dream lives. This conversation is packed with insights about breaking through your own blocks, accepting uncertainty, and making big things happen. I cannot wait for you to hear it, so let's dive on in. So welcome. So great to have you.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here. And yeah, I love that we've been able to reconnect. And now I'm excited that we get to record a podcast together on your new podcast. This is so exciting.
I know it's the relaunch of it to really help people get to their goals because I'm just seeing like especially in this day and age in the world of social media, we're seeing all these people going after their goals and dreams and I want to help people make that a reality and giving them tangible tips. So it is exciting. It's super exciting to have you here and it's so funny because I always say like if you would have told me 10 years ago that this would be happening that we'd be on a podcast together, we probably would have laughed really hard and been like, "What?"
100%. 100%.
But here we are, and I'm just so excited you're here because your story really inspires me, and I'm excited for you to share it for other people to really start to give them a framework if people are feeling stuck in their lives, and I've been there. I've been there when I'm feeling really stuck and you're just like, "Well, I guess this is how it's gonna be forever. I have no hope towards getting out and actually living the life of my dream." And pulling myself out of that, I think it's really important to have people who are doing really inspiring things give tangible tips on how to actually make that 180 in your life. So I'm thrilled for you to be here and share your story and really give that inspiration to people.
I'm so excited to do the same. I know. I feel like we all have those moments that we just like are just not feeling ourselves almost. And we know there's like other ways to live. We know there has to be something else out there, but the actual ladder of how do we get from here to there is foggy. And like we don't know where to start. When we don't know where to start and we don't have clarity, we never move. Like that is just
Yeah.
kind of the basic principle of like being a human, right? We don't want to go into anything that feels uncertain to us. But what that means in those situations is that we stay stuck, we stay stagnant, and that is the worst feeling ever. So I'm excited to talk about the same thing.
Yes, you're so right. Like if we don't have the blueprint, we're just staying where we're at. But I'm so curious because I actually after high school, I had no idea what you're up to. And so when we just reconnected, it's been so interesting to hear a little bit about what you've been doing, but I know that you started to work for Deloitte and then you quit and started to build your own life transformation and breathwork business and have been really successful in that. So I want to hear more about the decision to work at Deloitte and then also the decision to stray from that and go on your own path. Can you take us through that journey?
I would love to. So yeah, after school, like high school, when we worked together, I went to school at Clemson University for industrial engineering. So just about the furthest thing you could have from doing a job like this. And I don't know if it was just me or where we grew up or the type of people that I was around, but I had in my brain set that I would be working at a big four consulting company since probably I was 6 years old. And I will kind of give some background to this that both of my parents are accountants. They met working for a big four accounting company that now exists as like a different version of that company, like a conglomerate of some sort. And my mom does not work there anymore. My dad still has, and he will retire at this company. And so there is a little bit of like a primer, obviously, that was there for me. But yeah, I left. I went to school. I chose a job that would get me into that. I at first was like, maybe I'll explore all these different things. And then, of course, I came back to what I was good at, which was numbers and science and things that made sense to me. And I kind of rode that out until the end of school when I realized that that company, Deloitte, that was like kind of my dream company at the time, didn't even recruit from Clemson. And so that last year, I don't know if I manifested this just in context because at the time I didn't even know manifestation existed, but somehow right before I was about to graduate, they decided to recruit from Clemson for the first time ever. And I was one of the first people that was ever hired. Applied for an internship. I did not get the internship. It would have required me to move to Washington, D.C. But I must have done well enough because they only took, I think, one, maybe two interns from Clemson University as a whole. And I remember they called me afterwards and they said, "We don't have enough intern spots to offer you, but we really, really liked getting to know you and we're very impressed. Would you like to come to DC for a 2-day conference in the end of the summer?" So I went ahead, I applied for other internships. I worked in Chicago that summer and I went to this event at the end of the summer and I got like all of the experience that I wanted. And at the end, they offered anybody that was there a job. And so I went into my senior year with a job at Deloitte at a school that didn't even have Deloitte coming to recruit to it until the year before. And I just kind of was like riding high. I thought I had figured it out. And I give that context because I think it's important because that was where a lot of my struggles started. They didn't actually start at Deloitte. They started after I had accomplished this massive big goal that I thought was going to be like the cherry on top that would kind of solve all of my insecurities, all of my problems. I was kind of always hinging my self-worth on if I do this thing, if I do this, if I do that. And so with that, I remember just kind of feeling so excited like all of us do when we first get this big experience. But then my hopes kind of like crushed down. And I remember that kind of let down when I was going through my senior year. I didn't have a lot of classes at this point. I had finished almost everything in my degree. I was kind of just showing up for the fun of it. And the space that was in my schedule started to illuminate a lot of fear and a lot of insecurity and a lot of just like really heavy, painful emotions that I wouldn't have expected to happen in a year that was supposed to be the fun year, right? The year that I was supposed to
Mhm.
just be like flying free and enjoying everything. And it started to kind of create this new narrative in my head that said, you're doing great and like this is all good. But if you could just lose some weight, then you'll feel good. And
Yes.
so over the course of my senior year at Clemson, I started really leaning on running and exercise, not just to lose weight and feel better, but honestly to fill my time because I couldn't feel comfortable and settled in a normal moment in my life. Like I was not okay. And so this kind of unknowingly over the course of that year and the following years while I was at Deloitte spurred me into a pretty bad eating and exercise disorder where I would be at Deloitte in Washington, D.C., waking up at like 4:35 a.m., running around places in the city you shouldn't run in the dark as a girl who's 22, 23 years old. And I would be running 10 miles and would make myself run 10 miles every single day before I got to the office. Then I would like go through the day at the office. I wouldn't eat meals. I would refuse to eat meals. I had snacks all day. And then by the end of the day, I would try to hit another workout class before going to a happy hour, seeing people doing whatever else. And so that compounded over like pretty much the entire first year I was at Deloitte really just became my coping mechanism for I would say like this realization that was very deep inside of me that I wasn't actually doing what I was supposed to do, that I wasn't actually okay with who I was, that I didn't actually know how to answer like the big scary questions of like who is Andie? Like what do I want to do with my life? What am I good at? Like is Deloitte really what I want to spend my time doing or is it the only thing I know because it's the only thing I've seen? And so I again share this context because it was through healing the eating disorder, starting to kind of tip my toes in, like work with some therapists while I was still at Deloitte that I really started to come into myself and my own. And it was like the second and I'd say like start of the third year at Deloitte, where as I started healing my eating disorder, my confidence grew, my ability to speak in front of people at work grew, my belief in myself grew, and my ability to monitor triggers grew exponentially. Meaning, if someone was sending me a kind of like annoying email or something passive aggressive or calling me out because like they just didn't want to take ownership for themselves or if I just did something wrong, it no longer sent me into like the spiral of my whole world's going to end because I did this one thing bad at work. And that allowed me to actually find a lot of peace at Deloitte, which I think is the part of the story that's very surprising to people When I left Deloitte, I actually was really loving my experience there. I was working on a super cool project that, like, is now an airport, so I get to see it, like, because it's the government, so it takes, like, forever to do anything. But I get to, like, see the work I did, like, 4 years, 5 years ago, whatever it is, now when I go through an airport. Like, I had an awesome team. I had responsibility. I was feeling so good about myself. I had healed the eating disorder. And that kind of, I'd say, like, neutrality and, like, the lack of need to run from everything I was experiencing, it started to unearth these kind of, like, nudges inside me is the best way I could describe it. This was all around the time of COVID, so I just wanna keep that reminder of, like, I had a ton of space in my life, and I wasn't running from the space. But the nudges started with things like, "You should move to Denver," and, like, I had never been to Denver before, and so I was like, I guess in the middle of the pandemic, like, me and my roommate were gonna take this big, massive road trip. We packed up my Ford Edge and, like, slept in tents and worked during the day and, like, camped and, like, did all of these crazy things for a couple weeks. A month out, we, like, got an Airbnb in Denver, and while we were there, we just rented an apartment, and we stayed there for the rest of the year. And then a couple months later, I, like, woke up one day, again, feeling so good at my job, and I had another nudge, just clear as day, to quit my job. And so I quit. I was just kinda like, "I guess I should quit." Like, I don't know what it was in me, but something in me, I didn't know about intuition or any of it, was just like, it just felt so settled. It felt so right. I wasn't even scared about the outcome. I was like, I think I'll be fine. Like, the worst case, I just go back to Deloitte. I have a manager who already told me, like, he'll take me back. And so I put in my 2 weeks, like, 2 weeks after that moment, I showed up, I told my manager, I told all the people I needed to tell within 15 minutes of the start of that day. And every single one of them was like, "Oh, you wanna, like, quit your job to become this life coach on Instagram? Well, like, we are so excited for you, and when you want a job again, come back. We will hire you back at any moment." And so it was this kinda, like, weird moment where I was like, "No one else is excited about this like I am. No one else is, like, behind this like I am." But it did really provoke me into everything that I do now, which was, like, kind of learning how to communicate a lot of the massive shifts that I made in a very short time that helped me heal my eating disorder, helped me develop confidence in myself, stop actually responding to the triggers, and actually find a really strong sense of security in who I was.
Oh my goodness. Through this whole story, I'm just like at the edge of my seat, like, oh my gosh, you articulate everything so well. And I didn't know that. And even from the beginning, when you were talking about manifesting at Clemson, that they don't even take people, I'm just like, you are such a huge manifester and just like all of these things. Like you fully believed it when you were 6. And so it worked out for you. And I think you're just an embodiment of when you fully believe in something and you know to do something, you do it and it happens for you. Like that is, it's incredible to see that story arc. But I think there's a lot of people who stay in their job because they don't know what the next step is, or they don't know what the vision is, or they don't know, okay, yeah, I want to be the life coach, or I want to be an artist, or I want to be a software engineer, or whatever it is. But they get that pull of, okay, I can't stay where I'm at anymore. But they're so nervous to leave because the reality of the situation is they have bills to pay, or they have whatever it is that is keeping them from taking a jump. So I'm curious to hear what you would say with what would you do for people who are like, well, I know I don't want to say my job, but what do I do? It feels like I don't see the forest for the trees. Like I don't know what path to take forward. And I have all these things kind of holding me back from actually take the jump. So I just feel stuck in the mud where I'm at. What would you say based off your experience of how to move forward?
There's a quote that I think really embodies everything that I would say to this, and one of my mentors told it to me, so I can't take credit for this, and I don't know if she can either, but I love this quote, and it's that, "When nothing is certain, everything is possible." And so this whole idea of, like, we're humans. Every single one of us craves certainty because to our mind and to our body, certainty directly equals safety. But there's this thing that happens when we start to only make decisions when we have certainty or a certain level of certainty, right? Because, like, you never have 100% certainty. It's just perceived. So even when we're in our job, there's never 100% certainty you're going to be okay. At any moment in time, it might be unlikely, but they could fire you, right? Or something else could happen. And so there's never really 100% certainty. It's really just like the level of certainty we feel comfortable with in making decisions. And when we require that level of certainty to do any sort of moving forward, what immediately happens is we go from having endless possibilities, which kind of comes back to that quote, right? When nothing is certain, everything is possible. When there is no certainty around you, your possibilities are truly limitless because that's where miracles come from. That's where magic comes from because there's no stop. But as soon as you start saying, I need at least 70% certainty that I'll be okay, or 50% even, right? You start putting up these almost like barriers as to the possibility that is allowed for you. And so when we're sitting there and where it's like, I want a better life than this. We don't even have to know what that is, right? Like you don't even have to know you want to be a life coach or you want to, I don't know, work in a different type of job or meet the love of your life. Like you don't even have to know those things, even though I think most of us have a vague sense of what we want or at least a direction. You don't even have to know these things in order to realize that as soon as you require certainty to know like what you want to do, like basically saying, I need to not only have the exact business idea, but I also have to have the exact formula on how it's going to work. 3 of my first clients signed up, income set up for the next couple of months, this, and the other thing. All of a sudden, you've just limited all your possibility. Like you have just put up barricade after barricade after barricade after barricade of what could be possible for you when you initially got that nudge and realization that this is not right for me. Where I am right now, there's something in this that I should not be in. And
Mhm.
so my recommendation with this is like really, it's not to say like make rash moves and do stupid things and don't think about like the repercussions of it, but it really is to start to realize that like this craving that we all have for certainty, it's a biological instinct to crave that. It's okay that we have that. And the fear that we experience when we think of maybe quitting our job or starting the business or putting ourselves out there or whatever it is, that fear isn't something telling us stop. It's actually something that's urging us to like move forward. And the best thing that I've noticed is that when we can kind of couple that realization that fear is a necessary part of anything we do and start to almost look at our level of self trust and the repercussions of what could happen when things potentially go wrong, because obviously, like that's what's really causing the fear, we can start to see that anything that could go wrong, typically we can trust ourselves enough to pick up the pieces if it happens. And I think leaning on that trust in the face of grabbing that fear and going on that walk ahead with it is almost like the key to anything. Because it's like we're not ever going to get that certainty and we don't want it. So, what can we do to navigate the uncertainty better? And for me, that's self trust. That's understanding that any bad thing that's ever happened to me, even the worst things in the world, the things that have truly broken me and, like, left me not okay for weeks, months, even years, I've figured those out. I might
Mm.
have needed a therapist or needed a person or this or that or the other thing, but, like, I have always gotten out of those, right? I've always
Mhm.
picked up the pieces. And so if, for example, that job that I quit led me into this path of building a business where I lost all my money, which I did. So like, haha, like that happened. Like I told myself like, "Oh, it's okay. Like I lost all my money. Like, wow. I could go back to the job or I could do something else." But like in the beginning when I didn't know that was going to happen, that was my greatest fear was losing all of my money. I remember telling myself like, even if you lose all your money, you're gonna figure something out. Like, you can move in with your parents, which I also did. You can, I don't know, like, go back to Deloitte. You can do this. And so, like, trusting that even if the worst case scenario happens, you can always pick up those pieces is usually enough of a catalyst for most of us to realize, like, yeah, obviously we don't want that to happen, but it's enough for us to trust, like, well, I'd rather go for it than keep staying where I'm at, where I know isn't right out of certainty
Mhm.
that my future isn't gonna be what I
Mhm. For sure. For sure. And I think building the self trust is so important when sometimes we're so used to hearing different stories. And I know for me, I feel like I externalized everything. I needed people to tell me what path to take, I needed people to tell me what to do, what I was good at. Should I quit now or should I quit in a year because on my resume it'll look better if I was there for a year or what? I had everyone telling me everything and I was getting all this advice from other people. I remember being in corporate and there was this financial planner who came during lunch and he was telling us all these things about finances. I didn't even know who this man was, but I was taking his word for gospel. And I remember that was imprinted in my brain. So when I left my job, he had said something like, and I think we hear this all the time from financial people of you have to be making more than you're spending and you have to have a 401k and you have to have all these things and save for retirement, blah, 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 blah. And so when I left my job, I remember that was a voice in my head of like, okay, but I'm going to be spending more than I'm making in the first couple months because I'm going to be on my feet and I'm going to be traveling. Oh no, like, what do I do? And it's like, okay, I'll figure it out. And
Yeah.
you do. It might be different than what you expected it to be, but like you always will figure it out. But it's building that self trust a little bit, especially because I barely had any. I couldn't trust myself for the life of me.
No. And it's so interesting because it's like, you know, that example I think is so perfect because that man that's like giving you all this advice, never do we like stop and ask ourselves, like, do we want to live his life? Right? Because like that's great advice. If you want a very stable, certain future, if that's like the biggest value you have in your life, cool, awesome. But like personally, I want to like end my life feeling like I lived the richest fucking life ever. Like I did like the coolest, wildest things. Like I want to not just like believe magic exists, but experience it firsthand. And like if I'm going to open myself up to that, then like yeah, my life is not going to look like a 401k that's like fat and stacked every single year. Like there's going to be years where maybe my 401k I like contribute a bunch to it, and then there were certainly years where I didn't because I couldn't even like feed myself. You know what I mean? But it does even out and the trust comes and like you have like your growth only comes through struggle and through pressure. And so many of us are trying to avoid these like uncomfortable struggles and pressures that we've never experienced before. Like, for example, when I started my business, I didn't know how to make money for myself. I knew how to collect a paycheck. Collecting a paycheck is very different than generating money for yourself. There's different beliefs, there's different like processes, skills, associations, everything, energy, all of it. And so it took me like a year of investing in myself, right? I think I started the year, I had thankfully put a lot away while I was at Deloitte. I was like very comfortable with how we were living. And so I had put away like, I don't know, maybe 30 grand after they paid me out. And I thought I would spend the whole year and be totally fine. I'm like, I don't need 30 grand to live my whole life for the year. And it was so funny because I invested a lot in myself to learn how to start my business that year. And I got myself in positions that I don't regret at all, where I legitimately didn't have money. Like, I legitimately, like, if I needed to pay something, I couldn't have done it. And I had to move home with, like, my parents. I got a part-time job, like, sending emails for some, like, online accounting webinar company for $17 an hour, which was, like, well below my skill level. But all of it, it was, like, honestly such a beautiful lesson because how like, I never experienced that type of struggle before. Like, it's okay that I didn't figure it out on the first time. It's okay that, like, it didn't work out right away because what that taught me is that just because it's not working out right away doesn't mean that I shouldn't try harder. And so it's like we almost like look at these people who are like, well, if you don't want to experience any new things ever, and you never want magic and you never want miracles in your life, well, then choose the familiar problems over the unfamiliar, but the unfamiliar is what grows you. And so it's this kind of like weird contradiction we have too when it's like we don't trust ourselves. We're trusting these people whose lives we're like not even wanting to live because we don't know how to ask ourselves, well, then what type of life do we want to live? Because no one's
Mm,
taught like, no one's, like, ever provoked into thinking that.
yeah. And how do we even know? Like, I think sometimes too, I was asked, well, what do you want? And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah,
And I'm like, well, I know I don't want this, but I have no idea what I actually do want. And it's hard to know what you do want when you've been conditioned your whole life to live a certain way and you're like, well, what else is out there? I don't know.
yeah. It's so hard.
And I think knowing what you don't want is a good start.
It's a great way to
So it's
feel.
just don't do that.
Even at this point in my life, I still so value the things I don't want, and that statement reigns so true because it's not like you get to this point and you, like, miraculously have clarity over everything in your life. Like, if anything, I feel more lost now than I did when I started, but I can navigate that and see the possibility in that more, which makes it exciting.
Isn't that so liberating? I think I put a lot of people on pedestals of like, oh, well, this person must know way more than me. And it's so liberating to just remember we're all human beings who might know a little bit more in a subject than someone else, but at the end of the day, none of us really know what we're doing. Like, there's always gonna be something else that comes up that we have to navigate, and just when we think that we have it all figured out, something else is gonna come up and shake you off your path, and I think it is a liberating feeling to just be like, "All right, well, gonna have to trust myself to figure out what's coming my way because I have no idea what's coming up in the next level or the next thing that I'm doing." Because we don't stay stagnant. You get to the goal, like exactly what you're saying before. You accomplish the thing you want to accomplish, and then something else comes up. And so
Yeah.
it's just constantly being in flow and like allowing. So I think that's so beautiful. And for you to even admit that too, as someone who I definitely like look at and I'm like, wow, you have all these amazing things. And for you to just be like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know
I
what I'm doing.
and I'll say this too. I honestly can tell you, especially given the fact that 4 years ago, if you were to tell me that, like, again, I think we joked about this earlier, like, who would have like 10 years ago, the 2 versions of us sitting there, if you were to tell us, like, we're on a podcast, we would probably been like, I know myself, I would've been like, "What's a podcast?" Like, I would've been like, What? Like, what are you talking about?" Because
I would
that
have
was
been like, I'm too type A to be traveling the world for 5 years and not
yeah,
in corporate, climbing the ladder. Like, what?
exactly, and it's so funny because it's like, when I stopped needing certainty of what I wanted, well, 4 years ago, I was single, just recovered from an eating disorder, living in Chicago during COVID with my parents, and I don't even know, like, I was, like, definitely not, like, happy yet, but I was just living my life, you know what I mean? Like, it was what it was, like, I had gotten to neutral. Never would I have thought that I would have lived in another city. I would have married the love of my life. He would have been totally different than anything I ever thought I would have married. And like I would have had this dog who's a literal psychopath that I only got because I thought she was an angel. Like I would be running a business. I would be like making more money than my corporate job ever gave me. Like it's just so wild, but like here we are. And so it kind of has been I will say like I think it's a luxury that I have created right now, and I don't know if you feel similarly with your life, that I know when I put myself in uncertainty, my life gets better. The struggles are
Mm.
harder, but my life gets better overall. Now I can repeat that and like navigate the like, I don't really know what's coming next better than I think I would have when I was first in corporate, where some people might be listening to this from because I've experienced that. And so I do want to like normalize the fact that like when you're in those positions, it almost is easier for me to say that because, like, I have seen how my life has changed by doing it. Like, I experienced the first step. The risk when you're first starting, it doesn't make sense. You haven't had the experience yet. You don't know what's coming. It's okay to be more scared. Doesn't mean don't do it, but it means like it's okay to be scared and questioning it and doubting it while you do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. And I love what you said of it's like some kind of physics of just because your life gets better doesn't mean the struggles aren't as hard. It's almost like the struggles have to be hard and pull you one direction. And then there's some physics that's like, okay, well, we're going to pendulum swing and make your life better too. Like, I think a lot of people think, okay, I'm going to go after my goals and it's going to be amazing and everything's going to be butterflies and rainbows. And it's just like, unfortunately, that's not the case. Like, the struggles are hard, but it propels you. You got to go low so that you can go high. And so I love that too. And I love that it compounds over time. You build self trust. The first time is the hardest because you're like, shit, is there going to be a net that catches me? You catch yourself, you pull yourself forward. And then the next time you're like, oh, well, I already did that last time. So I'm going to be fine this time. And so it does get easier over time. Still hard, but a little bit easier than the previous time. And I know you mentioned calling in the love of your life, making more money than you did in corporate. So you talked about a little bit of neutrality, of finding that neutrality. You found that at the end of Deloitte when you were there. Do you believe that neutrality is the key to manifesting all these things? Because look, you manifested what so many people come to me and they're like, Nikki, I want to manifest my dream partner. I want my dream career and I want to be making a frick ton of money so that I can live my best life. And it really feels like you're embodying and you've manifested those things. So I'm curious to hear what you feel like is the secret sauce, that tip that has really catapulted you to having those things that you didn't have 4 years ago.
Yeah. I It's honestly crazy even when someone reflects that back to you because, like, all of us know when you accomplish things and you keep going through your life, sometimes you don't, like, realize how cool it is what you've actually done. And I just, like, appreciate you even reflecting that back to me because, like, I do receive that really, like, wow, like, yeah, I have done these things because, like, even when you grow so much, you still have doubts about what you can accomplish, right? Like, those things don't just magically go away. It just changes. So I appreciate you saying that. And I think when it comes to like advice or just like the magical sauce or secret to it, the neutrality does play a large part, but I look at it more like two main components. The first is that you need to honestly put all of your energy behind whatever it is. Like I think the moments in my life that I have manifested the best come from when I have one pillar, which is I will literally just keep showing up for this until it happens. I don't care if it's gonna take 5 years. I don't care if it's gonna take 30. I don't care what I have to do to get this. Like, this is going to happen in my lifetime unless God, universe, source, whatever, shows me that this is absolutely not meant to happen. And then I always will ask, I'm like, "Make it clear if that is that." And then I show up from that place. So there is a little bit of, like, non-negotiation that comes from it when it comes to success in manifesting for me. But there's this other part that is like equally valuable and has been present for every manifestation that I've ever done, which is the surrender. And I think this goes very hand in hand with neutrality. So when I manifested my husband, I will say that while I don't think I consciously knew what I was doing at this point, it very much was manifestation. So I've grown up believing in God, and while I was in DC and really struggling with the eating disorder, going there was a church out in DC that just like was my pillar. Like it was what I kept going to. So I'd always pray. And I was in this kind of like, I'd say like relationship that wasn't even a relationship because it was like one of those situationships maybe where like, because I met him the first day of work, I had convinced myself that because my parents met the first day of work, subconsciously I was like, there was a ton of really weird situations basically that happened that felt so kismet to me where I was like, you must be my future husband. And I was too nervous to necessarily, like, show up like that, but I kind of took this energy of, like, waiting for him to be ready for me, and, like, we'd go on a date, and then he wouldn't speak to me, and we'd hang out with friends, and he wouldn't speak to me, and it was this, like, weird, like, not actually relationship, but me, like, kind of waiting for this to work out. And so, it was around the time where I was really, like, changing a lot of things. It was right before Denver, during COVID, where I remember being like, I need to let this go. Like, I need to just not let this happen. He was dating someone that he had just broken up with. And I remember being like, he texted me out of the blue, and I was like, I have got to let this go. Like, I've got to stop hoping this is going to come. We moved to Denver, me and my roommate, my friend. I see him. I did not know he was living in Denver, by the way. He was living in DC last I texted him. And I go on a Hinge date, one of the worst I had 2 of the worst app dates of my entire life at this time, and I go on this date, and I walk into the restaurant, and there he is with a new girl on a Thursday night at a restaurant that's, like, relatively popular, but not that popular in Denver, as I'm, like, again, on a Hinge date in a city I just moved to. And so I am just like, "God, what are you freaking telling me? Like, what is going on here?" In that moment, I just remember being like seeing him with another girl and just being like, "Oh, I cannot keep playing this cat and mouse game. Like, I cannot keep doing this. Like, there is
Wait, that
some
is so crazy.
right? Like, I
It's like
want
one of those moments where you're like, "What is going on? There's a glitch in the matrix." Like, this man that you doesn't even isn't supposed to even be in Denver, and you walk like I've had so many moments like that where you're like, "Am I in a movie?"
yeah. If you think about it from this perspective, and 'cause this is how I see it, at least now looking back, I think I was being tested, right? Because, like,
Yeah,
there
yeah.
were more than enough signs that he was not supposed to be my person. So many. Like, everybody that knew him was like, "Get away. He sucks." Like, it was, like, constant. But it was so ingrained in me, like, I so wanted that to work out. There was something about him that was just, like, I had attached to and I couldn't let go of. And it was almost like every time I tried to let go, he would just show up. And I don't think that's because like I at first believed it was because, oh, it's meant to be. Like it's meant to be. I just have to hold on a little bit longer. But in reality, when I look back, it's funny because I've worked with so many clients like this, and I'm not kidding. Every time I work with a client on this, the same thing happens. I remember just realizing at one point, maybe this is actually the test to let go. Like to be so
Mm.
sick of this like waiting energy and like hoping energy and questioning if I'll ever be loved energy that I am just going to let go. And like if it's honestly meant to be the opposite, it'll be so weirdly abundantly clear that I'll just like no. And so I swore off app dating. I like swore off all of it. And I like remember praying and being like, God, like I am so done. Like if my person exists, like I am so here for it. And please give him the struggles, the challenges, everything he needs in order to become who I need him to be and give me those too so that I can become who he needs me to be. And like if I'm not meant to be with anyone, right? Like if there's not someone in my life, like that's okay too, just help me become okay with that. And that was like my surrender. And I share that
Mm.
because 3 weeks later, I was introduced to this guy who also lived in Denver. It was one of my old roommates from Washington, DC, who was like, "Hey, I think I have a friend that just moved out to Denver. He's also new. He like has a couple friends there. You guys should like all meet up."
Wait, I'm like tearing up.
So yeah,
This whole time my eyes are getting watery just like hearing you speak about everything. I'm like, okay, everything's fine. I'm fine. I need tissues and a fan. I just have goosebumps this whole time. Okay, keep going.
I
Everything's
just
fine
feel
over here.
like these are the moments to me that it's like magic does exist because what's even crazier about this, so this guy's name was Kevin. We got drinks. I didn't think anything of it, honestly. I just remember hearing he was from the Midwest, and I was like, "Wow, I haven't been around a Midwesterner, a fellow Midwesterner in so long because I've lived in all these other cities." Like, maybe I just really like him because people from the Midwest are awesome. Like, I remember just literally for the first 3 months being like, "Oh, he's so easy to talk to. This is great." And I found out all of these things basically like we ended up dating. Our relationship turned very fast. He was supposed to be deployed, which I always promised myself I would never date a military man. Like I was out. My sister joined the military. It has been a really difficult experience for me and for a lot of people in my life. And I was like, I do not want that. But like this is just proof that God, universe, source, whatever, like they you don't know what's best for you. Like you just don't. Like we none of us do. And so I resisted dating him for a while. Long story short, we're married now. We got married within like 10 months of meeting each other on paper. And then our wedding was after he got back from his deployment. But what's crazy about this, and I just think this is hopefully hope for so many people out there, regardless of your manifestation. When we started dating, I remember looking at our pictures because Kevin lived in Washington, D.C. at the same time I did. Kevin had been to my apartment with my good friend many times. Kevin worked on the same floor at Deloitte through a contracting company at the same time I did. He went to the same gym I did. He was in the same parties in my house that we have pictures from the same night in the same parties, but we never met. Like we didn't even like never. And if you look back at his life story and what he was going through then, and if you look at my life story and when I was going through then, we both admit that if we had met at that time, it wouldn't have happened because I was attached to this other guy and he was like going through other stuff. And so it wouldn't have gone right. Like we might have hooked up or like something would have happened, but like it wouldn't have ended in the way that we hoped. And I just think it's such beautiful proof that it's like we came back together both at the same time we were actually ready for each other. Like you can't make up the fact that both of us randomly moved to Denver. Like I had 3 cities on my
Yeah,
list to
what?
yeah. Right, like, I'm not kidding. When I told my parents I was moving to Denver, they were like, "Okay, like, why? Like, you've never been there." And I was like, "I don't know. I really wanna go to Denver." I was obsessed. I had a whole playlist, like, called Rocky Mountains, and it was just, like, a bunch of Denver songs, and I had never been there before. I had never seen it. I just became, like, weirdly obsessed. So and it's funny because he had the same exact experience, basically. He was gonna move to Austin, Denver, or San Diego, and I told my friend, and she can vouch for this, we were gonna visit all 3, and then we were gonna move to 1. And we started at Denver, and we loved it so much, we got an apartment. So it's just so funny because it's like, I could never have manipulated that, right? Like, I could never have
Right.
made that happen, but it's almost like we have to, like, answer the challenges in front of us and, like, grow from them in order to be ready for our manifestations, whether it be like your person or whether it be like something else. And I think the key in that was like showing up for those challenges. Like if it's a business, showing up for like your audience on Instagram or on TikTok or through your email or podcast or whatever. And then also surrendering to it and surrendering to the timeline and just trusting like it is going to happen. Like it is going to
Yeah.
be okay. And I can like love my life until that happens.
I think that's such a beautiful balance of like what you said at the beginning. It's a non-negotiable, but I'm going to like let go of the chains of it needing to happen this second and I'm going to enjoy the ride as it goes. And I love this whole story. Like literally here I am tearing up along the way because it's so beautiful. I have so many people that come to me and they're just like, "Nikki, why am I going through this time? Like, this feels so hard. This feels so difficult." And I think that's a beautiful reminder that the things we go through, it's even though sometimes we might not love it, it's our path, it's our story, it's our lesson that's helping us up level if we allow it, if we accept the challenge to get us to where we want to go. If we see it as, okay, I'm going through this to be on my path, it's happening for me to continue to up level and I we can see it in a different light of being like, "Oh, I'm a victim to this situation." It's hard in the moment, of course. I have so many moments where I'm like, "Why is this happening?" But then we can come out and be like, "Okay, it's happening because I have to this is what I learned from it." Happens to me all the time. I feel like I go through things really difficult and then I somewhat get to the other side and someone asked me a question of like, "Oh, well, I'm going through this. Like, how do I get through it?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, I just went through that, ironically enough, unironically, because is it really a coincidence? Like, we're going through stuff so that we can help other people or share or whatever it is. But it's shitty in the moment. But look
Yeah.
where it gets you. I love I love that inspo.
I always think about it too with like what you're just saying with my business because it's like my business, I wouldn't say it like quote unquote failed, but like let's just say for all numerical standpoint, like I lost all of my money. I like didn't have any clients. I didn't have a following. I had to get another job. I moved in with my parents. My husband was deployed. So I was just like in a real low position. And then my business took off. So like after a year of really hard work and failing, then it took off. I think back to that sometimes because I remember that position, like questioning, like, is this really going to work out? Am I meant to help people? Whatever else. And it's like so funny because if I didn't experience that, I would have been a shitty coach. Like, I'm not going to lie. Like, I needed to learn what it felt like to do something and put all of my effort into it and it not work out and then still choose me and what I wanted anyway in order to like learn the lessons to be like a really good coach. And so it's like, even when you think it's not working out for you or those challenges are so frustrating or annoying and maybe they're signaling that it's not meant to be and it's like no, like there's nothing in this world that's not meant for you. Like it's just that's how it is. Like there's nothing in the world that is not meant for you. It's always a decision and it's like sometimes you need to fail to get what you want. Like sometimes you literally need to fail at what you want many times before that comes. It's like not an indicator and like those failures and those whatever other struggles, they're like literally only there to grow you so you can
Yeah.
get what you want. It's just
Yeah.
like such a different mindset swap.
Yes, it's like our perception of the failures. It's almost like let's
Yeah.
fail so we can get there. Like let's just but also enjoying the journey along the way. Like I always say this, I have goals that I want to hit and sometimes when I don't hit them I get like, "Ugh." And it's like, "No, no, no, look at what I have." And what are my expectations? Like I'm traveling, I'm enjoying my life, I'm creating a different life for myself. Can I enjoy now versus when I get to X thing? And I think that's the huge struggle. And so many people are like, well, I'm not going to be happy until I have the husband or the partner or I have the six, seven, eight, whatever figures in the business. It's like, well, how can you learn to let go and enjoy the process along the way? I mean, that sounds so cliche, but that's ultimately what it is. Then you
Like
get to the top and then you're finally realizing, oh, well, then I just wasted all these years not enjoying the journey to get here. So,
yeah, there's this concept that I feel like you would really appreciate and hopefully a lot of people listening will very much appreciate that has landed so well for me. And it's like rather than manifesting what you want to manifest, husband, life partner, business, money, I don't even know what else. Rather than just trying to manifest that, why don't you become the person that life wants to manifest ideas and things through? And I think it
Yeah.
was Taylor Swift, or at least that was the first example that I had that actually came up. She gave some speech in the last couple of years where she talked about how like a song literally comes through her. It's like, and I
Mm,
remember learning this. I think it's like Einstein or something talks about when he was like solving a very complex equation. And forgive me if that was the wrong sciencey mathy person in the history that did that. But like there's some sciencey mathy person in history that verbatim
that
talks.
seems about right. That
I
seems
but
about
it
right.
we'll take it.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
talk about it's like the problem, like they aren't logically mentally solving it. It comes through them. And so if you think about like this flip, right? Of instead of like, okay, I want $50,000. Instead of going, I want $50,000 and like almost some of us will get very stressed out by that, right? Like the type A in us or the like go-getter, which is important and I don't think should go away. But that 50,000 we latch on and we almost like stress ourselves out and we can't surrender to it. So it's almost like looking at it in the other way where it's like where like, if life gave you ideas and life gave you, like, $50,000 ideas, how do you become the person that life trusts with a $50,000 idea? How do you
Mm,
become the person life trusts with a song that's gonna change the lives of millions of girls around the world, right? Like, Taylor Swift has clearly shown up to become that person. Like, over 18 years or however many years she's been performing, like, she has constantly shown up. She's constantly, like, bared her heart, like, gone through shit, shown up for it anyway. She does not get put down. And I think when you can start to change that mentality, it can really take the
mhm.
stress off of it of like, how can you become the like person that life manifests things through and like trust with
Yeah.
its ideas? Because if
Yeah.
you just focus on that, it's not as desperate energy from what I've found. And sometimes that mindset shift is enough for those of us who are like really trying to manifest something and we're like, why isn't it coming through? It's like, okay, well, like, look at you for a second here. Take the ideas out of it and like, let's just focus on that for a second. And so I think that shift is just very helpful. It's been very powerful for me because it's like, I don't want to be the person, like, I know we were recently talking about this, like, I don't wanna be the person that just, like, sits at my house all day and works on my business, which, to be honest, is kind of the person that I have been the last couple years. It's like, I don't really trust life to actually manifest ideas through me at this point. So, like, what can I do to mess that up? Like, what can I do to start to, like, live harder, live bigger, like, be bigger, build my belief, like, put myself in situations where intentionally I hope that there's struggle. Like, I hope that there's things that go wrong. Like, I hope that I have to cry. I hope I have to scream. I hope like I have to learn, you know what I mean? Because it's
Yeah.
like that's how you become that person. And so it's
For
like
sure.
starting to look at it in that way, I just think it's a very empowering way
I
of
love that flip.
taking that
Yeah.
responsibility off almost, but
I
putting it
love that perspective. That's such a good perspective shift of instead of, "Oh, I want," it's like, "No, how do I become?" I love that flip. That's so important. I feel like I could literally we could literally talk forever. Like, we could this could end up being like a 5-hour podcast, and I'll definitely have to bring you on again, but I wanna kind of wrap up because I know you talk a lot about self-sabotage, and I'm curious as to it all sounds well and good while we're out here talking about all these things and it feels so good. But how are there ways that that people start to self-sabotage and how do we overcome them so that we can actually do the things?
Yeah, great question. So, really quickly, to understand how to fix it, you have to understand what sabotage is. And self sabotage at its root is a learned protective mechanism that all of us hold. So, it's learned through a fear response, meaning that when we are afraid of something or when there is kind of a trigger in our daily lives that our mind and body have learned is not fully safe, it can cause some level of pain. Our mind and body will do what they can to help us avoid that thing. And this all comes back to 6 primal fears that create the majority of our self-sabotaging patterns. So the primal fears are fear of conflict, fear of success, fear of complexity, fear of failure, fear of what are the others? Rejection and fear of judgment. So these 6 fears are responsible for the majority of our self-sabotaging patterns. So when you go to like let's just say speak on a stage and you start to get really anxious and nervous and be like I really don't want to do that, but you know speaking on that stage has the potential to put you in front of audiences that might pay you or might just give you opportunities or it's just like an experience you've never had and therefore could lead to different results in your life. Self-sabotage shows up because it says, well, what if you get on that stage and you get judged or rejected? And while a lot of us can logically remind ourselves, like, judgment doesn't matter, we'll be okay in the face of rejection. If I fail, you need to fail 1,000 times in order to succeed. The interesting part about it, and this is the part that really comes back to the healing of it, is realizing that self sabotage, while yes, there are patterns we have that lie in our subconscious mind, the majority of our self sabotaging patterns are actually triggered through our body, meaning that we are actually mentally aware that fear of failure, for example, is not a bad thing. It's not bad to fail. Failure is needed to get to success. But our body so desperately is not comfortable and does not feel safe in the face of failure. So our body is triggering these avoidance responses. Therefore, you
Mm.
procrastinate. You don't fill out the form to get up on the stage. You accidentally make yourself sick right before you're about to go up. You get super sleepy and fatigued. You have no creativity, so you can't even think of what you're going to speak about. All of these are very subtle ways that self sabotage will show up. And so when you think about self sabotage like that, and you realize self sabotage is really just our body's way of protecting us from things that we logically want, but our body doesn't feel ready and safe to have, you can then look at how to fix it in a lot more of a tangible way. Meaning, rather than us just trying to change our mindset on how to not sabotage, right? Or how to be okay with fear, it's actually like, how do you get your body to feel safe in the face of these things? And so, what that will oftentimes require is actually going back to our past and asking ourselves, where did we learn not to feel safe in these instances to begin with? And that
Mm.
questioning oftentimes is gonna bring us back to maybe not, like, in the moment, because a lot of us will suppress these, so we're not gonna, like, fully know it as we're talking about it or thinking about it. But in the majority of cases, there are different ways we can kind of go beyond the logical mind to actually access the parts of the body and the ways that pain was stored so that we can heal it and we can let it go and we can permanently kind of give ourselves more space and freedom and ease towards taking action
Mm.
towards these big goals that we have. And so when we think of kind of more tangible ways of like, okay, what can we do now though? Like maybe you're not in a position to invest in deep somatic work and healing your self sabotage. Maybe you just like are kind of like, that's a lot. Like, what can I do in this moment alone? Because I understand that it's a lot, right? Like, we're working at a much deeper level when it comes to self
Yeah.
sabotage. I think that's something a lot of people don't understand when they first ask that question. We then can kind of look at, okay, like, well, what can we tangibly remember? And I think the biggest reminder is something that we've honestly talked about a lot through this podcast, that fear, like when you are afraid, like when you are self sabotaging something, asking yourself, what are you afraid of? Like, if you're to get really real with yourself, what are you afraid of? And how can you get comfortable holding fear and moving forward? So not just saying, "Oh, I have this fear," and then, like, backing up and being like, "I guess that means I shouldn't do it. I guess I should reroute," but actually consciously acknowledging the fact that, "Oh, I'm procrastinating on this. Oh, I'm afraid of this thing. Oh, that doesn't mean I shouldn't do it." That actually is a permission slip to go forward and, like, following the fear instead. I think this is one of the most tangible ways that you can mentally start to walk yourself through the process of slowly overcoming some of your self-sabotaging patterns.
Yeah.
Hopefully that was helpful.
Wow. No, that's so helpful because I think ultimately it's really interesting to know that it's just a bodily response. We're just trying to protect ourselves. I think so many people get stuck in a loop and they get stuck in a cycle and they're like, well, how am I still here 3 years later in the same spot that I was? And it's just your protective mechanism. That's where you feel safe. And I love the way that you articulated it and you explained it. And honestly, the first step is just asking yourself, what am I afraid of?
Yeah.
And can you face that head on? And can you give yourself compassion while you're at it because you're just trying to protect yourself of
Yeah.
what you already know. So, oh, I mean, we could go on and on and on, but I think this is so good and this is so many golden nuggets in this to listen to and hopefully start to implement after this podcast. I know is a lot, but I think if there's one thing to take away from it, it's that. It's asking yourself, what are you afraid of? Well, maybe now there's three things to take away. One, what are you afraid of? Two, what's your non-negotiable? And three, how can you surrender to it? to help you towards that path of where you want. Anything that you think you would add to that?
No, I love that, and I think, like, maybe wrapping it up also with, like, uncertainty is a good thing. Like, start to dance with
Mm,
uncertainty and fear. Like, those things are,
dance
like,
with it. I
yeah,
love it.
dance with it. Like, learn the dance of dancing with uncertainty and fear because they truly are the things that will change your life. Like, they are good things. They are things we should seek
Oh.
out, like, welcome them in.
That's a huge mind flip because so many people are like, "Fear, not good, angry red monster, uncertainty, no, don't do that." And it's like, I love that flip. I love that. It's like, "No, they're besties. They're coming on the road trip. Like, let's go. Let's do
Yeah,
it." Because if we didn't do the things we were like, if I didn't go abroad and go to Bali and get my yoga certification and start traveling the world, I was so afraid to the point where I was like, I don't know how I pushed through, but I do know how I pushed through is it was a huge intuitive thing where I'm like, "I'm doing it." And that was the thing. I was like, "This is non-negotiable. I'm going." But I felt so much fear. But if we feel it and don't do anything about it and just like keep ourselves stuck where we're at, we're not going to change our lives at all. And so I think you have such a good point. It's like, yeah, welcome them. Hey, fear. Hey, uncertainty. That's what's going to shift you and change you. So I love that. I love that. There's so much gold in here. So thank you so much. I love chatting with you. I think you're so articulate. I think you have so many amazing ideas, so inspiring to hear your story and lots of things that didn't even know. And I loved learning that about you. I feel like I've just been sitting here tearing up the whole time because it's been so inspiring, so amazing. So thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for being here. And people can find you on Instagram, on TikTok. How else can what's the best way to find you?
probably Instagram. There are 2 handles, and I'll give them both to you, at the Self-Sabotage Coach and then at Andie Colleen with an underscore. And there is a really great free masterclass that I have available on both of those if you just click the link in my bio. But it's a totally free masterclass, and it just gives you a lot more perspective of the self-sabotage topic. So if anyone was listening to that and they were like, that was super quick. Like, what? Like, what do I do with this? That resource, it's a 90-minute masterclass, so it is a little lengthy, but it actually gives more tangible exercises, and hopefully that will also be valuable for people.
Oh, I'm sure it'll be very valuable to people. Even hearing you speak for 2 minutes, I'm like, this is valuable. So you have so much value. So thank you for being here and thank you for sharing. And I can't wait to hopefully bring you back on to talk about more things because clearly we can just talk forever. So
Yeah,
thanks
thank you
for
for having me. This was so fun.
yeah, of course. I know. I just every time I talk to you, I just light up. So it's amazing. Thanks for tuning in to Clarity with Nikki. By being here, you've already taken the first step to creating a life that's uniquely yours and getting off autopilot to find real fulfillment. If you're ready to go deeper, I've got a free masterclass to help you on your journey, and I highly recommend starting there. So check the link in the description to get on your way. And come hang out with me on Instagram at Clarity with Nikki for more tips, inspiration, and behind the scenes fun. If you loved today's episode, I'd be so grateful if you could take just a minute to leave me a review because your feedback helps get this podcast out to more people who need it. So keep thriving, keep shining, and keep creating your dream life. You've got this. Much love, and I'll see you in the next episode.